Hello, my dear students. Once again, you are welcome to class. Now, in this topic, we will be looking at another very interesting aspect of mathematics. We will be looking at how to make state locations. So, we'll be looking at the concept of bearings. Okay, so it's important to note that bearing is the direction or position of an object or person relative to a fixed point. So basically, we'll be looking at how to state our directions and positions in a very logical manner. So that is what we have in the concept of bearing. Now, bearing is usually measured in degrees using a compass. Please take note, you must make sure it is in degrees. Now, there are four main compass directions or the cardinal points: the north, the south, the east, and west. And there are four secondary compass directions: the northeast, NE for short, northwest, southeast, and of course, southwest, SW for short. And this is a diagram of a picture of the compass showing the four main compass directions: north, south, east, and west, and the four secondary compass directions: northeast in between east and west, southeast between south and east, southwest between south and west, and northwest between north and west. So it's important you take notes of these directions and what they mean, where they face. Now, looking at the types of bearings, there are three basic types of bearings: the compass bearing, acute angle bearing, and three-figure bearings. Now, in some textbooks, the first two may be taken alike. Now, for the compass bearing, this involves locating the correct compass direction of one point from another. So basically, it's for you to look at the compass and look at the directions. So let us take an example. Let's say, what is the compass bearing of B from A in the figure below? Okay, so looking at this, you have 2 points here, point A and point B. Now, it is important to take note of the fact that you must always recognize the word from. Always take note of the word from. It tells you where you are expected to begin your measurement from, or where you're supposed to take your measurement from. So your next point to take the compass bearing is very simple. Connect the midpoint of these 2 points, points A and B. Connect their midpoints with a straight line like this. Okay, so when you have done this, what you are expected to do is to look at point A, because the question says from A. So look at point A. Where does this line meet point A? At what compass direction? And this is the compass again. Now, when you look at this compass very critically and remembering the figure you saw before, point A and B, looking at point A, which of these directions did our line touch point A? Now, if you look at it very carefully, you will see that the line is touching point A on the southwestern direction. Always take note of the word from. The question is the compass bearing of B from A. So since it is touching point B, touching point A at the southwestern direction, you can say that the compass bearing of B from A is southwest, or SW for short. Now, the acute angle bearing involves measuring the acute angle formed between the north-south or vertical line and the given line. And don't forget that acute angles are angles that are less than 90 degrees. Okay, so this is another way of stating bearings. Now, the acute angle bearing, acute angles are measured from the north or south pole. And the north pole is the line facing upwards, and the south pole is the line facing downwards. So take note of that. Now, looking at an example, let's say, what is the acute angle bearing of B from A in this same figure? Now, if you look at this, if you look at point A, remember I said take note of the word from. So looking at point A, there is an acute angle of 45 degrees formed between the south pole and our given line. Now, acute angle bearings involve measuring the angles formed between the north or south pole and the given line. Another thing you should take note is this: which direction is also connecting the given line. Now, if you look at this, the given line is in between the south pole and the west pole. Now, the given line forms an angle of 45 degrees from the south pole towards the west pole. Okay, now recall I said it involves measuring the acute angle formed between the north-south or vertical line and the given line. Our given line in this case is the green line that we have there connecting points A and B. So the question is, what is the acute angle bearing from B to A, from A to B? So looking at this, since it is formed on the south pole towards the west pole, and it is an angle of 45 degrees, we say that the acute angle bearing is south 45 degrees west. South 45 degrees because it is formed from the south pole, 45 degrees because the angle formed there is 45 degrees, and west at the end because it is tending towards the west pole. So we have the acute angle bearing of B from A to B, south 45 degrees west. So that is how you calculate acute angle bearings. Please take note that sometimes in some textbooks, acute angle bearings may also be referred to as compass bearings. Okay, they may be interchanged, but basically for the sake of this topic, we will make these differentiations from what we have just highlighted. So next up, we will be looking at the three-figure bearing. Now this involves measuring the angle in degrees formed between the North Pole and the given line in a clockwise direction. Please take note, in a clockwise direction, and you are starting your measurement from the North Pole. Okay, this your measurement must be from the North Pole. Now, for angles that are less than 100 degrees, 0 is placed in front of the digits. For example, 30 degrees will be written as 030 degrees. Okay, and 90 degrees will be written as 090 degrees. 84 degrees will be written as 084 degrees. So please take note of them. Whenever it is less than 100, 0 must be added to the number. Now, let us go on taking up an example on this. Let's see, what is the three-figure bearing of what's the three-figure bearing of B from A in the figure below? And this is the same figure we had earlier on in example 2. Now we want to state the same bearing, but this time around as a three-figure bearing. Now what do you do? Very simple. Of course, your line, the given line is already there connecting point A to B. So remember, you have to start from the North Pole, which is the line facing upwards. Okay? And then you trace the angle down to the given line in a clockwise direction. So if we are to do that, we see that from point A, you have 90 degrees over there, you have another 90 degrees here, and then 45 degrees. So in a clockwise direction, the angle formed from the North Pole to the given line will be 90 plus 90 plus 45 degrees, which is 225 degrees. So this is our three-figure bearing. In other words, what this means is simple. The acute angle bearing south 45 degrees west is the same as 225 degrees. Taking up another example, say if the bearing of P from Q is 130 degrees, what is the bearing of Q from P? Okay, P from Q is 130. What is the bearing of Q from P? Okay, so what do we do? First of all, make a sketch. So this is Q and this is P, and the question says P from Q is 130. That is why we have 130 on Q. Now what is Q from P? Basically, you're expected to measure the angle from the North Pole on front P in a clockwise direction until it meets the given line, which is this part we have there. Now to solve this, of course, there are many ways you can go about this, but we'll look at simple ways that you can understand and always apply. So please pay keen attention to what we are about to do. Now, how do we solve this? Like I said, there are different methods that you can apply to this. First of all, looking at point Q, the north-south line is 180 degrees, that's angled on a straight line. So if 130 is over there, what else will be remaining? 50 degrees to make that 180. And that 50 degrees on point Q is also equal to the 50 degrees you have there on point P, because they are alternate angles and alternate angles are equal. Now note that from point P, angles in a circle is 360 degrees. So if that part is 50, the remaining part will be 360 degrees minus 50 degrees, which is 310 degrees. So that means the three-figure bearing is 310 degrees. But there are other methods you can use. For that method, take note of this. If the given bearing is less than 180 degrees, just add 180 degrees to it to get the corresponding angle. That is, to get the corresponding bearing. Okay, if you are given an angle less than 180, to get the corresponding bearing, just add 180 to what you are given, and it will give you the correct figure for the corresponding bearing. Now we are going to apply this to what we just solved earlier so that you can understand what we mean by this point. Looking at example 4, it says if the bearing of P from Q is 130, what is the bearing of Q from P? Now this is 130 and it is less than 180. So to get the corresponding bearing, which is Q from P, all you have to do is add 180 to 130 and it will give you the corresponding bearing. So add 130 to 180, that gives you 310 degrees. And if you remember what we solved earlier, it was the same thing we got when we used the first method. Okay, now the second point you should note is this: if the given bearing is greater than 180 degrees, all you have to do is subtract 180 degrees from it to get the corresponding bearing. Okay, if it is less than 180, add 180. If it is greater than 180, subtract 180 from it. That will be a simple way to calculate the corresponding bearing. Okay, so let's take an example on that. Let's say example 5. If the bearing of N from N is 260 degrees, what is the bearing of M from N? Now remember that in this case, the given bearing 260 degrees is greater than 180. So what did I say we will do? I believe you still remember what I said we will do when the given bearing is greater. All we have to do is subtract 180 degrees from our given bearing. So we have 260 degrees minus 180 degrees, and that gives us 80 degrees. So that is to say that the bearing of M from N is 80 degrees. So my friend, this will be time for you to evaluate yourself based on the video you have watched, what you have listened to. Remember what bearing is, remember the types of bearing, and also you should be able to state a particular bearing either as acute angle bearing, three-figure bearing, or compass bearing. So until the next time, my friend, I say thank you for watching the video. Take your time, answer the quiz, do the assignments, and until the next time I see you, my friend, I say
another day without your smile. Another day just passes by, but now I know how much it means